Hi, this is Kerry. Today I'd like to do a video review of the Faeries Oracle with illustrations by Brian Froud and text by Jessica Macbeth. I don't have the box for this deck anymore as I managed to lose it a while ago. However, as you can see, the book itself is a hardback, beautiful imagery, wonderful coloured sort of paper. So, they certainly didn't scrimp on quality in creating this deck. And there are sort of not exactly black and white images. They're semi-coloured for each of the cards, or in a blue scale, I guess. So you have card images. There's also quite a chunk at the start where they offer some spreads and explanation of fairies in general, how to connect with them, how to read with these cards, and some spreads, as I say. Overall, this is a really interesting book and quite useful for working with this oracle. Unlike the Fairy Ring Oracle, it doesn't really give information that you could say was historical or mythological about the fairies. This is much more a deck where it feels like this is about what is being channeled by the artist and the author with regard to fairies. As for the fairies themselves, they are split into a number of groupings. Let me bring this in closer. So, we start with the singers, and these cards are very ethereal, energetic, rather than showing a sort of tangible physical fairy. In fact, in the text, they liken these almost more to angelic energy rather than what might traditionally be associated with fairies, and say it's really a matter of degree, that these are the more energy-based fairies. And their singers, they bring these aspects into existence, so they are the concept before it's made manifest almost. So we have the singer of courage and of initiation, of healing, of transfiguration, of love, that's called the chalice. And then finally, Solus, who is the start of manifestation into our world. Then we have the she, who are the lords and ladies of fairy. So in that sense it does have historical, or I hesitate to say factual, but a more based in previous experience of fairies. And here we have a number of archetypes: maiden and journeyman, the bright mother, and himself, who's a horned sort of, I'm not sure whether he's more like Herne or more like Pan, but something like that. And I think these images are just amazing. While I feel that the Fairy Ring Oracle gives a more accurate expression in terms of information for historical understandings of fairy, for me, Brian Froud's image is very much how I feel fairies would actually look if I were able to see them. There's such a depth of expression in these cards. I think they're wonderful. Then we have a section called the Guides and Guardians. Sorry, wrong way around. And once again, these aren't really fairies that I've seen mentioned elsewhere, or only sort of they vaguely link up. but the images are just amazing. And in the book, for each card, you also get keywords and quite a long description of the card, as well as what you can learn from it or how to work with it. So it's a very good deck in that regard. And the images are delightful, enticing, fantastical. We then come to what they call the helpline troop, or the wee folk, and they're described as having a bit more of a sense of humour, not being overly concerned with a human sense of dignity, or what they would call pomposity. One of the things that I like less about this deck is the fact that the titles are a little bit difficult to read because of the font. Like, this is G.U. the Slew, which kind of makes sense, but List of the Shadows. Sometimes the font gets in the way of actually being able to read what's on the cards. However, you do also always have a number, and the book is very clear and legible. So these are the wee folk who can help us, though they are playful, cheeky, don't mind the odd joke, and if it's at our expense, well, that's just the way it is. They can be a little bit frightening, but they're still beautiful. Then finally we have the fairy challenges, starting with death. So these cards are the ones that are a little more difficult, that show sides of ourselves that we may not like. For example, the Soul Shrinker is the aspect where there's a lot of criticism of others that shrinks other people's souls. And the Gluminous Doom is our self-pity, which can condemn us. So these are the more challenging cards, and I like the fact that there are darker aspects here. It's not just a light and airy fairy deck, shall we say, because traditionally fairies do have those darker aspects, and so this is honoured in this deck. Altogether, I think it's a very powerful and beautiful deck. As I say, this is how I imagine fairies might really look, rather than just being super pretty people with wings. Altogether, a very interesting and useful deck. Blessed be.